Hi Ron and Penny, it's Angela again. I am reading Boy again from Roald Dahl. This chapter is called Land of Cathedral School, 1923 through 5, ages 7 through 9. The Bicycle and the Sweet Shop. When I was 7, my mother decided I should leave kindergarten and go to a proper boys' school. My good fortune there existed, a well-known preparatory school for boys about a mile from our house. It was called Land of Cathedral School, and it stood right under the shadow of Land of Cathedral. Like the cathedral, the school is still there and flourishing. But here again, I can remember very little about the 2 years I attended Land of Cathedral School between the age of 7 and 9. Only 2 moments remain clearly in my mind. The first lasted not more than 5 seconds, but I will never forget it. So he has some pictures. The top one is himself with his 2 sisters. It says Elsie, me, Afgild, I think was his sister's name. The other sister. And then there's a picture of them having a picnic with their mother, with Mama. And then over here, Land of Cathedral. It was my first term, and I was walking home alone across the village green after school when suddenly one of the senior 12-year-old boys came riding full speed down the road on his bicycle about 20 yards away from me. The road was on a hill, and the boy was going down the slope, and as he flashed by, he started backpedaling very quickly so that the freewheeling mechanism of his bike made a loud whirring sound. At the same time, he took his hands off the handlebars and folded them casually across his chest. I stopped dead and stared after him. How wonderful he was, how swift and brave and graceful in his long trousers with bicycle clips around them, and his scarlet school cap at a jaunty angle on his head. One day, I told myself, one glorious day, I will have a bike like that, and I will wear long trousers with bicycle clips, and my school cap will sit jaunty on my head, and I will go whizzing down the hill, pedaling backwards with no hands on the handlebars. I promise you that if somebody had caught me by the shoulder at that moment and said to me, "What is your greatest wish in life, little boy? What is your absolute ambition? To be a doctor, a fine musician, a painter, a writer, or the Lord Chancellor?" I would have answered without hesitation that my only ambition, my hope, my longing, was to have a bike like that and to go whizzing down the hills with no hands on the handlebars. It would be fabulous. It made me tremble just to think about it. My second and only other memory of Land of Cathedral School is extremely bizarre. It happened a little over a year later when I was just 9. By then I had made some friends, and when I walked to school in the mornings, I would start out alone, but would pick up 4 other boys of my own age along the way. After school was over, the same 4 boys and I would set out together across the village green and through the village itself, heading for home. On the way to school and on the way back, we always passed the sweet shop. No one didn't. Let me try that again. No, we didn't. We never passed it. We always stopped. We lingered outside the rather small window, gazing in at the big glass jars full of bullseye and old-fashioned humbugs and strawberry bonbons and glacier mints and acid drops and pear drops and lemon drops and all the rest of them. Each of us received 6 pence a week for pocket money, and whenever there was any money to go in our forwards, we would all troop in together to buy a pennyworth of this or that. My own favorites were sherbet suckers and licorice bootlaces. Here's a picture of the candies that they liked. There we go. The one says sherbet sucker on it. Thwaite's father, who was a doctor, had said that they were made from rat's blood. The father had given his young son a lecture about licorice bootlaces. When he had caught him eating one in bed, every rat catcher in the country, the father had said, takes his rats to the licorice bootlace factory, and the manager pays 2 pence for each rat. Many a rat catcher has become a millionaire by selling his dead rats to the factory. But how do they turn the rats into licorice? The young Thwaites had asked his father. They wait until they've got 10,000 rats, the father had answered. Then they dump them all into a huge shiny steel cauldron and boil them up for several hours. Two men stir the bubbling cauldron with long poles, and the cruncher that is lowered into the cauldron to crunch the bones, and what's left is a pulpy substance called rat mash. Here's a picture of the licorice bootlaces. That looks familiar, doesn't it? Yes, but how do they turn into licorice bootlaces, Daddy? The young Thwaites had asked, and his question, according to Thwaites, had caused his father to pause and think for a few moments before he answered it. At last, he had said, the two men who were doing the stirring with the long poles now put on their Wellington boots and climb into the cauldron and shovel the hot rat mash out onto a concrete floor. Then they run a steam roller over it several times to flatten it out. What is left looks rather like a gigantic black pancake, and all they have to do after that is to wait for it to cool and to harden so they can cut it up into strips to make the bootlaces. Don't ever eat them, the father had said. If you do, you'll get ratitis. What is ratitis, Daddy? Young Thwaites had asked. All the rats that the rat catchers catch are poisoned with rat poison, the father had said. It's the rat poison that gives you ratitis. Yes, but what happens to you when you catch it? Young Thwaites had asked. Your teeth become very sharp and pointed, the father had answered, and a short, stumpy tail goes out of your back, just above your bottom. There is no cure for ratitis. I ought to know. I'm a doctor. We all enjoyed Thwaites' story, and we made him tell it to us many times on our walks to and from school, but it didn't stop any of us except Thwaites from buying licorice bootlaces. At 2 for a penny, they were the best value in the shop. A bootlace, in case you haven't had the pleasure of handling one, is not round. It's like a flat black tape about half an inch wide. You buy it rolled up in a coil, and in those days it used to be so long that when you unrolled it and held one end at each arm's length above your head, the other end touched the ground. Sherbet suckers were also 2 a penny. Each sucker consisted of a yellow cardboard tube filled with sherbet powder, and there was a hollow licorice straw sticking out of it. Rat's blood again, young Thwaites would warn us, pointing at the licorice straw. You sucked the sherbet up through the straw, and when it was finished, you ate the licorice. They were delicious, though, those sherbet suckers. The sherbet fizzed in your mouth, and if you knew how to do it, you could make white froth come out of your nostrils and pretend you were throwing a fit. Gobstoppers, costing a penny each, were enormous, hard, round balls the size of small tomatoes. One gobstopper would provide about an hour's worth of non-stop sucking. And if you took it out of your mouth and inspected it every 5 minutes or so, you would find that it had changed color. There was something fascinating about the way it went from pink to blue to green to yellow. We used to wonder how in the world the grasshopper factory managed to achieve this magic. How does it happen, we would ask each other. How can they make it keep changing color? It's your spit that does it, young Thwaites proclaimed. As a son of a doctor, he considered himself to be an authority on all things that had to do with the body. He could tell us about scabs and when they were ready to be picked off. He knew why a black eye was blue and why blood was red. It's your spit that makes a gobstopper change color, he kept insisting. When we asked him to elaborate on his theory, he answered, You wouldn't understand it if I did tell you. Pear drops were exciting because they had a dangerous taste. They smelled of nail varnish and they froze the back of your throat. All of us were warned against eating them, and the result was that we ate them more than ever. Then there was a hard brown lozenge called the tonsil tickler. The tonsil tickler tasted and smelled very strongly of chloroform. So there's a picture of what he's talking about. We had not the slightest doubt that these things were saturated in the dreaded anesthetic, which, as Thwaites had many times pointed out to us, could put you to sleep for hours at a stretch. If my father has to saw off somebody's leg, he said, he pours chloroform onto a pad and the person sniffs it and goes to sleep. And my father saws his leg out without him even feeling it. But why do they put it into sweets and sell them to us? We asked him. You might think a question like this would have baffled Thwaites, but Thwaites was never baffled. My father says tonsil ticklers were invented for dangerous prisoners in jail, he said. They give them one with each meal, and the chloroform makes them sleepy and stops them rioting. Yes, we said, but why sell them to children? It's a plot, Thwaites said. A grown-up plot to keep us quiet. The sweet shop in Landen in the year 1923 was the very center of our lives. To us, it was what a bar is to a drunk or a church is to a bishop. Without it, there would have been little to live for, but it had one terrible drawback, this sweet shop. The woman who owned it was a horror. We hated her, and we had good reason for doing so. Her name was Mrs. Pratchett. She was a small, skinny old hag with a mustache on her upper lip and a mouth as sour as a green gooseberry. She never smiled. She never welcomed us when we went in, and the only time she spoke were when she said things like, I'm watching you, so keep your thieving fingers off them chocolates. Or, I don't want you in here just to look around. Either you forks out or you gets out. But by far the most loathsome thing about Mrs. Pratchett was the filth that clung around her. Her apron was gray and greasy. Her blouse had bits of breakfast all over it. Toast crumbs and tea stains and splotches of dried egg yolk. It was her hands, however, that disturbed us most. They were disgusting. They were black with dirt and grime. They looked as though they had been putting lumps of coal on the fire all day long. And do not forget, please, that it was these very hands and fingers that she plunged into the sweet jars when we asked for a penny worth of treacle toffee or wine gums or nut clusters or whatever. There were precious few health laws in those days, and nobody, least of all Mrs. Pratchett, ever thought of using a little shovel for getting out the sweets as they do today. The mere sight of her grimy right hand with its black fingernails digging an ounce of chocolate fudge out of a jar would have caused a starving tramp to go running from the shop, but not us. Sweets were our lifeblood. We would have put up with far worse than that to get them, so we simply stood and watched in sullen silence while this disgusting old woman stirred around inside the jars with her foul fingers. The other thing we hated Mrs. Pratchett for was her meanness. Unless you spent a whole sixpence all in one go, she wouldn't give you a bag. Instead, you got your sweets twisted up in a small piece of newspaper, which she tore off a pile of old Daily Mirrors lying on the counter. So you can well understand that we had it in for Mrs. Pratchett in a big way, but we didn't quite know what to do about it. Many schemes were put forward, but none of them was any good. None of them, that is, until suddenly, one memorable afternoon, we found the dead mouse. Here's a picture of Mrs. Pratchett putting her hand in the candy jar, and of course it looks filthy and gross. And that's the end of that chapter. Oh, it was really a lot of fun reading to you today. I hope you enjoy listening to this. I wanted to show you really quickly my flowers. I love this arrangement. I got it from Whole Foods, and I'm going to try to show you. Here we go. And these are real flowers. They're not fake. And I noticed how really sturdy they were, and that's why I bought them, because I thought these won't die so quickly as all the others. So anyway, they're really cool. It was the last arrangement at the Whole Foods on Mason Montgomery. Really cool. So anyway, well, you two have a great day, and I hope you have a very happy Father's Day, Ron. And I hope to read to you. I will read to you again very soon. Take care and God bless. Love you guys. Bye-bye.